Clarksville Department of Electricity. And I've been doing these presentations for folks going through the Green Certification Program for, I guess, a little over 3 years now. And I've always used the same presentation. It's one my boss made before I even started this job. And I chose today to make my own presentation and totally start over from scratch. So I'm glad they put the cameras in here. But some of it's still the same. So CD Lightband, we're a nonprofit municipal utility. And we were created in 1938 to serve about 70,000 customers nowadays with about 200 employees. And we buy 100% of our power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. But so they pass down to us most of the regulations, and the programs that we participate are in and through our partnership with the Tennessee Valley Authority. And I'm going to tell you about a lot of those programs today because a lot of them are very beneficial to business owners. Our electric rates are about 20% lower than the national average. That's in large part because of our relationship with the TVA. But the national average is about 13 cents, and currently ours is about 10 for most businesses. So a little more about that. I am going to tell you some about how you're billed, and then we'll get to why this is important. This is very closely related to how you become more conservative and operate a more efficient business. So there's a customer charge in every bill, depending on what rate class you fall in. This is currently what your customer charge might be. And then there's also your energy charge. So that's what you pay per kilowatt hour, and depending on what rate class you fall into, this is currently what your electric rate would be. Something that I did not put up there, but I'll tell you all about, is demand charge. Are any of you familiar with demand charges and maybe have them for your own businesses? A couple of people shaking their heads. So, what's important about energy efficiency and electric usage is not necessarily how efficient you are all the time, but when we're at peak demands, energy becomes much more inefficient to produce. We have to employ, or TVA has to employ, all of their generation assets to meet those peaks. And so a really important part about making a sustainable electric system is to reduce those peaks as much as we can. Those peaks are really predictable. For Clarksville, they come between about 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning in the winter time, and they come between about 3 and 5 p.m. In the summertime. And so that's something we're really focused on lately. That's a big part of my job, is finding ways to reduce those peaks, incentives that we can offer to customers to help them reduce those peaks. And the demand charge that you pay is because it costs so much more money to generate electricity during those peak times. And so pretty much all utilities around the country charge demand charges when they are on peak, and we do the same thing. But we can help you reduce that number. You can call us, and every business is unique, so I won't tell you there's just one blanket solution for everyone, but if you call me, we can work with you to help figure out what's the best way to do that for you guys. This is just a little bit about how we calculate your bill. It's pretty straightforward if you think about it. It's just your current kilowatt hour usage times the current rate plus your customer charge and your demand charge. You could actually calculate your bill every month yourself by looking at the meter on the side of the building, kind of running it through this formula. And our current rates are always posted on our website, so you can get updated rates and demand charges from there anytime you like. Okay, so this is something that my boss didn't have in his presentation. I really like charts and graphs, so I'll rush through them, but there's a whole bunch of them. This is energy usage for residential customers. These are national averages. I think I pulled these from the Energy Information Administration. So This is important to know because all of you also have a home. You can see that most of your electric usage is from space heat and air conditioning. Lighting and appliances makes up a pretty small piece of the puzzle because they're all lumped together, and most people kind of consider that their major source of electric consumption, but really space heating and cooling is the biggest part of it. Water heating is a much bigger deal than most people assume that it is. And then the other graph, the line graph there, shows that in our region, our electric energy consumption has actually increased at a faster rate and to a point that it is higher than all other regions of the country. They attributed this mostly to the increased population size in the South. These statistics are good through 2009. It's hard to get numbers past then, but I'm pretty sure soon they'll update these studies. That doesn't mean that we use more electricity per capita. Per household, they still use more electricity in the Northeast, which is sort of a good sign that our efficiency measures are on track, but we do use more power overall. And this is not just electric energy. This is BTUs of energy used from any source, fuels, natural gas. And just a little bit of background because it seems relevant right now. I'm an energy auditor, so that's not just electrical energy, that's energy of all sources. And I'm basically on retainer for the businesses of Clarksville. You can call us anytime, and we offer a lot of services. Like, for instance, they were talking about simple paybacks for lighting projects earlier. We can come up with that simple payback number for you, tell you how long it would take a project for it to pay itself off, or what the possible financial implications of replacing a piece of equipment with a more efficient version of itself might be. Definitely keep in mind that we're a good resource for that. This is residential customers specifically for our own system. And what we did is we just graphed the weather data for that period of time on the blue line and the electric energy consumption of our system in the red dotted line. And the electric energy consumption, pretty much like you would expect, it goes up just a little bit there to 1319 when the temperatures are at their highest. But really, when it goes up the most is when temperatures are at their lowest. And you can see two different periods when temperatures got very low during that time frame. And those are by far the two most dramatic spikes in electric usage for our system. So here, the obvious solution is to turn thermostats down. It's heating systems that cause those dramatic spikes at particularly cold parts of the day. And so we do a lot of work just trying to get out the message that when it's going to be that cold, you should really keep your thermostat set a little lower. They're mostly electric heat pumps in this region, so you don't want to adjust them. You don't want to make wild swings. But you want to just keep it set at a low, consistently low and efficient setting. We suggest 68 degrees. Now for commercial customers, there's other considerations. If you have customers coming through you have a sales floor or something, then it may not be worth it for you to make that adjustment. You've got to keep your own customers comfortable. She's going to take the picture properly. That's something you can do on a weekend for very little cost that will greatly reduce the air infiltration and exfiltration of your building, and so your heating and cooling costs go down. And if heating and cooling costs are such a huge portion of your energy consumption, then it makes a lot of sense to do those projects. Appliances and lighting. This is an easy one for us to help you with. If you want to know how much is it going to cost to change out all these T8 fluorescent fixtures to new LED fixtures, we can tell you that, and then we can tell you based on how much energy you'll be saving, it'll take you a year to pay back that cost or whatever time period. A lot of businesses want to see that simple payback period before they make an investment, and I'm more than happy to come up with that number for you. If it's a really big project, we have TVA at our disposal. They have some much better engineers than I am who can come down and look at simple paybacks for more complicated projects or equipment replacements. SEs and the renewable energy, those are things that you'd want to consult with us about. There's a lot to changing a whole production process just to be more efficient, and TVA would be the one to help with that. And TVA also offers incentives for installing renewables like solar power, battery storage systems, basically anything you could think of. There is a chance that TVA would be willing to incentivize the project. As far as HVAC equipment goes, I will take this slide out in the future because by the time I get here, I've already pretty much covered all this. Those are your temperatures. And another really important thing, though, is to make sure that they're serviced annually. If not annually, every 6 months would really be what an HVAC technician would suggest. And then when you consider replacing older units, that's when it's important to understand that every unit is rated by a SEER, which is a seasonal energy efficiency ratio, or ER, which is just the energy efficiency ratio. Not to get too far into it, we can use these numbers associated with the new unit you're considering to come up with how much energy it's going to save you over time, and thereby how long it'll take for you to pay off the extra cost of investing in the more expensive unit. So SEER, ER are the important numbers for air conditioning equipment. And HSPF is basically the same number, but it considers other things for heating equipment. And then the proper sizing calculation just means make sure that the HVAC contractor there's a manual J calculation they do to figure out what size unit you need for your building, and it's really important. It's really important that it be done properly. So that your heating and cooling system is not undersized or oversized for the space you've got. Insulation and weatherization is also part of heating and cooling, and sometimes the building codes are not necessarily the same thing as the most efficient possible practices. So just because the insulation in an attic is up to code doesn't mean that it's what the Department of Energy suggests for our region in terms of energy efficiency. They suggest R38 to R60 in attics. That's just how they rate how much insulation you've got up there. And then crawl spaces, walls are actually, code is pretty close to the recommended suggestion for this region. I think code says R13. And the suggestion from the Department of Energy is 13 to 15, so it's pretty good. And then something that we do that's related to weatherization and insulation is thermal imaging of buildings. So it's pretty much impossible to know if you're missing insulation in one of these walls back here. I guess you could go around knocking on it and looking for hollow spaces, but we'll also come around and take thermal images to locate uninsulated areas. There are a few here that, things like windows down here in the bottom right-hand corner, you would expect to show up purple. That doesn't mean that's not an efficient window. It's just, it is a window, and windows are inherently less insulated than walls. But there are some things at the top of that page on the right that we found in a home, basically just an uninsulated space in a wall. A contractor just forgot to insulate part of the home. That's a pretty good thing to find. I mean, there is a little work involved in getting it insulated, but it will pay for itself. There's ways you can figure out how much heat you're losing through a space that size, and it's a lot. So it's worth finding. And then around doors and windows, you'll find that there are blue spots that show up, and those are easy fixes. A little weather stripping or caulk line around a window or something might fix that most of the time. But we put these reports together mostly for homeowners, but we'd be willing to do it for businesses too. We just haven't gotten that call yet. Appliances and lighting, when you want to be efficient in these areas, it's really simple. Energy Star makes it so easy to know how much power an appliance is going to use over its lifespan. I would say, though, that they use the national average per kilowatt hour as far as dollars or cents per kilowatt hour to calculate those numbers. And we're actually a little bit below the national average here. So you would expect that your energy usage will be a little bit lower than whatever it shows on the label. And those labels look like this, probably pretty familiar with those. So they're pretty self-explanatory how they work. And then because I talked pretty fast and showed you a lot of graphs, if you need access to any of this information online, these are my 3 favorite resources. So EnergyStar.gov is where a lot of this information comes from. And then EnergyRight.com is TVA's website. So this is where you can get general information, but also you can apply for the incentives that we're talking about. So any project that you're considering, call us, go to EnergyRight.com. Let's find out if it would qualify for some incentive or some payback before you go and do it. Really, the projects in energy efficiency sell themselves because they'll pay for themselves, but it's nice to get the added bonus of a check from TVA on top of the project paying for itself. And then 2escore.com, just for all the homeowners. That's sort of like Energy Right, but it's for residential customers. It's for energy